Trump tried to shut her down, called her names, and tried to take the room. But Jasmine Crockett gave him something far more damaging, the truth, calmly delivered. They thought it was going to be just another made-for-TV town hall, held inside the packed Glass City Center in Toledo, Ohio. The criminal justice reform event had been promoted for days across every major network. President Trump, still seated in the White House, was appearing live alongside selected lawmakers from both parties. The cameras were set, the moderator had rehearsed every cue card, and the audience had been carefully screened for balance. It was supposed to be a tight, contained evening, give the public something polished, say a few agreeable things about law and order, get some applause, and move on. That's what the team expected. But something felt off from the start. Inside the green room backstage, staffers were whispering. One aide noticed Trump was unusually quiet during prep, not calm, but quiet. He kept glancing at his notes, then at the monitor, tapping a thick stack of talking points. No red cap tonight, just a navy suit and a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. In the front row of the audience, families impacted by policing laws sat holding signs with names of sons, daughters, and brothers, silent but present. Local Ohio activists had made sure they were there, just within the camera frame. Backstage, Congressman Alan Pierce from Florida muttered under his breath, "This panel's too stacked. Too many voices, not enough softballs." He'd been lobbying producers all morning to drop Jasmine Crockett from the lineup. Too direct, he'd warned. Too unpredictable. They didn't listen. And now she was standing just a few feet from the President of the United States, poised, still unreadable. The moderator welcomed the nation, reading off a scripted intro. Applause filled the room as each speaker was introduced. Crockett was last. She gave a nod. Not to the crowd, but to herself. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, a former public defender and civil rights attorney. The applause came, but it wasn't as loud as Trump's. The room still leaned red, and everyone knew it. But Crockett didn't flinch. She reached down, adjusted the mic, and waited. The first 20 minutes moved slowly, generic talking points, polished sound bites. Trump repeated phrases from earlier campaign stops. "We've done more for criminal justice than anyone, more than Obama. Tremendous success." The audience responded with trained claps, but it was routine, rehearsed. That's when it started to shift. The moderator turned toward Crockett. "Congresswoman, you've reviewed recent DOJ reports. Do you feel current federal efforts are enough?" She leaned in. No, the silence was sharp. Even the moderator paused, expecting her to pad the answer. She didn't. "Can I explain why?" The moderator gestured, and the floor was hers. Her eyes locked on Trump. Not aggressive, just firm, measured. "I've read the December 2023 DOJ report on the Fort Worth Police Department. It cites violations that mirror the same patterns we saw in Baltimore, Louisville, and Minneapolis: use of force issues, racial targeting, lack of oversight." Trump shifted in his chair, just slightly. "I listened to you say last week in Baton Rouge that police reform is done under your administration, but these reports don't lie, Mr. President. People are still being harmed. And when you say it's done, it feels like you're saying their pain doesn't matter anymore." Gasps. "No. Just that kind of tight, pressurized silence where everyone pretends to breathe normally." Trump responded with a smile, but it was the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Well, Jasmine, and I know you like the camera, but maybe stick to your district. You don't understand the federal system. We've done more." She cut in. "I do understand it. That's why I'm telling you, the problem isn't fixed. It's ignored." Now, the room stirred, not applause, not heckling, just energy, like people realizing something real might actually be happening. And just like that, the night had shifted gears. The old format cracked. The lines weren't being followed anymore. But the real moment was still coming, and it would flip the whole night on its head. There's a reason people underestimate Jasmine Crockett. She doesn't walk into a room trying to dominate it. She doesn't use buzzwords. She doesn't perform. She waits. She listens. And when she speaks, it cuts. She had been sitting quietly on the far right of the panel for the first half hour, no visible notes, no fidgeting, just calm observation. She watched every twitch of the president's jaw, every shift in tone. She wasn't looking to grandstand. She was waiting for precision. Back in Dallas, where she built her career as a public defender, Crockett had a reputation. Judges would warn prosecutors, if she's quiet today, get ready. It meant she was loading facts like bullets, not for theater, but for timing. That night in Toledo, she had timed everything. Once she cited the DOJ report, people started leaning forward in their chairs, not just the audience, but the other panelists too. Congressman Pierce blinked 3 times, looking toward the stage crew like he wasn't sure if they should cut to commercial. The moderator froze, trying to regain control. Trump smirked, but it didn't stick. She had more. I'm not saying policing is easy, she said, looking directly into the camera now. But telling Americans it's fixed while people are still getting brutalized isn't leadership. It's PR. The president leaned forward. Excuse me, that's a lie. We've put more money into reform than anyone. You're ignoring the facts. She tilted her head slightly, almost like she was giving him a second chance. No, sir. I'm quoting the facts. She opened the folder in front of her. Crisp, no post-its, no highlights, just 3 printed pages. According to your own DOJ, the Fort Worth Police Department used tasers against black drivers at 5 times the rate of white drivers. In the same report, your administration said, quote, no pattern of bias could be concluded. Explain to me how that works. Trump didn't answer. He waved a hand. That's out of context. You people always twist numbers. That report had nothing to do with me. That's old data. The room wasn't buying it. She followed quickly. It was published under your Department of Justice less than 4 months ago. Silence. Trump's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked toward the moderator like he wanted a lifeline. None came. One woman in the audience coughed. Then someone else muttered, she's right. That was all it took. Now you could feel the room start to shift, not against Trump, not entirely, but toward her. People who had tuned in expecting another bland exchange were now gripping their phones, recording. Jasmine continued, keeping her voice steady. We keep watching mothers on TV burying their kids and hearing the government tell them everything's under control. It's not. And when someone like me says it out loud, you treat it like a threat. But I'm not here to threaten. I'm here to represent. Trump finally burst. You don't represent anyone but yourself. You've been on TV for what, a year? Don't come up here lecturing me about problems I've already solved. You think you know more than me? Without hesitation, she replied, when it comes to lived reality, yes, I do. Boom. The words weren't shouted. They weren't dramatic, but they rang with clarity, like glass breaking in a quiet room, a moment where a crowd stops pretending to be neutral. Some clapped. Some murmured. The moderator started speaking, trying to recenter the discussion, but the heat had already shifted. Everyone on that stage now knew this wasn't about policy anymore. It was about control, and Crockett had just taken it. Trump leaned back in his chair, blinking fast, face reddening. He motioned to someone off stage, probably hoping for a break, a shift in topic, something. But Jasmine wasn't done yet. I came here to talk about justice, and justice doesn't work if only one side gets to define it. She closed her folder and folded her hands in her lap. That small act, closing the folder, said more than 10 more minutes of debate ever could. She wasn't playing defense. She wasn't seeking approval. She had said what needed to be said, and the country was watching. But when Trump fired back again, louder, meaner, desperate to save face, everything was about to spiral out of control. The moderator cleared his throat and tried to reset the tone. "Let's remember," he said, glancing nervously between the panelists, "this conversation is meant to be constructive. We want a productive exchange." Trump cut him off. No, I'm not going to sit here and let this woman grandstand on my record. She's not even on the Judiciary Committee. She barely made it to Congress. Give me a break." His voice was louder now, sharper, like he needed to reclaim the room by sheer force. It wasn't policy anymore. It was personal. Crockett didn't move. She didn't look rattled. But this time, she spoke with more weight behind her voice. "I was elected just like you. And I earned this seat, not with money, not with ads, but with service. So you can mock me, Mr. President, but I've defended people in courtrooms you've never stepped inside." There was that shift again, that slow collective inhale from the crowd. They weren't sure what they were witnessing, but it wasn't the usual cable news routine. It was something raw, something people would talk about in break rooms and family chats the next day. Trump laughed, but it didn't carry. Defended? "Lady, you don't know anything about how this country really works. You people always talking, never doing. You people," Jasmine said softly, not outraged, just clear, deliberate. Trump stammered. "No, I meant Democrats. I meant, you know." The moderator's eyes widened. Everyone on stage sat still. Crockett tilted her head slightly, eyes locked on his. "You sure that's what you meant?" Trump looked off stage again, waving a hand like he was done with the exchange, but she didn't let go. "Because I know what it sounds like when someone tries to make me smaller with language. I've been hearing it my whole life. The difference is, I don't flinch anymore." You could feel the people in the crowd looking around at each other, some uncomfortable, others nodding slowly. And then Trump made the mistake that would get replayed on every screen in America. "You're not that important," he snapped. "Nobody even knew your name until 2 minutes ago." That was it. The line that broke it wide open. Crockett paused, then smiled, not mockingly, but like someone who just confirmed everything she already knew. "That's the thing, sir. You think people have to be famous to matter." The line hit like a slap. Someone in the second row whispered, "Wow," a little too loudly. Jasmine kept going. "There are millions of people in this country who feel invisible, who get dismissed the second they speak. They're told to sit down, be grateful, be quiet. I'm not famous to you, but I'm known by the people I serve, and they know exactly why I'm here." Trump tried to interrupt again, but this time, the moderator stepped in. "Mr. President, let's allow her to finish." Trump laughed bitterly, waved off the moderator, but leaned back in his chair. His arms were crossed, face tight. It was clear he was seething. Jasmine stayed calm. "I didn't come here for claps. I came here because I've watched too many families cry on the courthouse steps. I've held mothers whose sons were gone. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were driving in the wrong neighborhood. That's not a headline. That's a Tuesday. And if me saying that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says more than the reports ever could." Some in the audience began to clap, not the whole room, but enough that it couldn't be ignored. A man in the back stood up. A woman near the center put her hand over her heart. Trump leaned into his mic again. "You're done." And Crockett, without missing a beat, said, "Not even close." That line ended up printed on T-shirts less than 24 hours later. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't name-calling. It was something more dangerous to power, clarity. She didn't need volume. She had truth. And people could feel it. But the next thing out of Trump's mouth wasn't just defensive. It was mean, loud, and ugly. And it would change the tone of the entire night. At this point, the energy in the room wasn't just shifting, it was splintering. There were supporters who came draped in red, white, and blue, who now sat uncomfortably still, arms crossed tighter, avoiding eye contact. Some were glancing toward the exit signs. Others looked down at their laps. It wasn't the clash they came for. It was something else, something too real, too revealing. Trump leaned forward in his seat, ready to unload. "You know what your problem is," he said, stabbing his finger in her direction. "You don't respect authority. You don't appreciate law enforcement. People like you are always complaining, always looking for a victim story. That's what gets you people votes." Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned into her mic, still calm. "You think criticism means disrespect. That's why nothing changes. Law enforcement should be honored when it's honest, when it protects, not when it punishes first and explains later." Some clapped. She didn't wait for applause. "I've represented officers in court. Good officers. I know the difference. That's why I don't back down when the system hides behind uniforms instead of fixing what's broken." Trump scoffed. "Spoken like a true liberal. You're a disaster, an embarrassment. Nobody cares what some angry congresswoman from Texas thinks. Honestly, you're lucky you're even up here." Gasps this time, real, audible ones. The moderator froze again. He was out of place. The producers were waving silently behind the cameras, signaling for a commercial. They weren't getting one. Jasmine turned her head slowly, eyes still on Trump. "You think this is luck?" Her voice dropped a register, lower, but somehow more powerful. "This isn't luck, sir. This is 20 years of grinding, working cases nobody else wanted, defending people who couldn't afford a name like yours to protect them. This right here is what earned looks like." The room was heavy now, like the oxygen had shifted. Even Congressman Pierce, who had tried earlier to get her pulled from the lineup, was leaning back in his seat, lips pressed tight. He didn't want to be part of this moment. No one on the panel did, because Jasmine wasn't just making points. She was drawing lines in permanent ink. Then a voice came from the audience, clear, loud, unshaken. "She's telling the truth." Heads turned. It was an older black man in a denim jacket near the left aisle. He stood up slowly, holding a photo in one hand, a young man's face, smiling in a graduation cap. "That's my grandson," he said. "They shot him during a traffic stop 2 blocks from our house. Said he reached for something. It was his license." Security moved toward him, but Crockett raised her hand slightly. She saw him. "What's his name?" she asked, voice steady. "Terrence. Terrence Miles." She looked at Trump. "You hear that name? Because there are thousands just like it. Not numbers, not polls, names, lives." Trump didn't respond. She turned back to the man. "Terrence Miles. We carry his name with us tonight." The man sat back down quietly. No more words, just that photo. It wasn't just Crockett speaking now. The audience was speaking with her. You could feel the tremble in the room. People were no longer watching a panel. They were witnessing a moment. The line between politics and pain was gone. Even a few of Trump's supporters, men in polos, women holding small flags, sat looking straight ahead, still as statues. A young woman near the back whispered to her friend, "She's saying what nobody else ever does." The camera panned slowly, catching reactions, tears, tight jaws. And Trump, silent. For the first time, the president didn't know what to say. His arms were still crossed, but he wasn't leaning forward anymore. He looked away, his foot tapping beneath the table, small, nervous. And Jasmine sat straight, hands still folded, like she had waited her whole career for this moment, not for herself, but for everyone who never got to speak. But what came next wasn't just uncomfortable. It was a full meltdown, and it would air across every screen in America before the night was over. He tried to smirk, but it fell flat. The weight of the last few minutes was sinking in, and everyone could see it. Donald Trump, a man who made a brand out of control, was losing it. His hand gripped the edge of the table. His lips moved, but for a moment, no sound came out. He glanced toward the cameras, then back to Crockett. It was clear he wanted to say something that would knock her off balance, but nothing was working. She was still watching him, like a lawyer does when a witness starts unraveling on the stand. Finally, Trump exploded. "You know what? I'm sick of this nonsense," he snapped, eyes wide. "You're fake. You're fake smart, fake tough, fake everything. You've been coached for this moment. It's pathetic. You don't care about justice. You care about looking good for TikTok. You care about clicks." He turned to the moderator. "This whole thing is a setup. You put her up here to humiliate me. I should walk off this stage." The moderator leaned forward nervously. "Mr. President, with respect, this was an agreed panel." Trump waved his hand violently. "Don't talk to me like I'm some guest. I'm the President of the United States." Now people in the audience were pulling out their phones again, not to record a discussion, but to capture the meltdown. Jasmine stayed quiet. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even flinch. Trump continued, voice rising. "You think she's some kind of star now because she threw around a few stats? Please. I've built businesses. I've run this country. I've been dealing with people like her for decades, loudmouths who show up for the cameras, then disappear when it's time to actually fix things." Then he looked at Jasmine directly. "You're a disgrace." A long beat. She leaned forward finally. "You don't get to define me, sir. And you definitely don't get to define disgrace." Now the crowd was murmuring, phones up, microphones picking up every syllable. She didn't raise her voice. "I'm not here for the spotlight. I'm here because people like Terrence Miles never got one. I'm here because people who don't look like you don't get this platform unless they fight 10 times harder, speak 10 times louder, and still get told they're not enough." Trump interrupted again. "Oh, here we go. The race card. Every time someone like you loses an argument, it's racism. That's your only play." That was it. The room didn't gasp. It didn't erupt. It froze. Because in that moment, everyone understood what had just happened. It wasn't about policy. It wasn't about crime. It wasn't even about reform anymore. It was about who gets to speak and who gets shut down the moment they get too good at it. Jasmine's response was immediate. "No, sir. You played that card the second you called me, you people. I'm just reminding you that some of us didn't get where we are by buying our way into it." That line would play on every cable news channel that night. Every major clip that circulated on social media kept replaying it over and over. Backstage, producers were in chaos. One kept shouting, "We need a break. We need a break." But no one dared cut the feed now. It was too big, too real, the kind of thing that couldn't be edited or polished later. The moderator tried to intervene again, weakly. "Congresswoman Crockett, maybe we can," but she was already wrapping up. "I'll stop here," she said quietly. "Because I think the country just saw what I've been saying, and not just from me, from him." She gestured lightly toward Trump. Then she turned to the audience. "I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here to stop pretending that truth needs permission." Silence. Then, one by one, the crowd began to clap, not just the ones who agreed with her, but even a few who didn't. Because no matter what side you were on, everyone in that room had just watched something rare. Someone standing their ground with nothing but facts, history, and nerve while the most powerful man in the country came undone in front of her. But it wasn't just the people in the room who witnessed it, because within minutes, the clip would hit the internet like wildfire, and America would take sides. The clip was only 93 seconds long, no flashy graphics, no dramatic music, just a split-screen shot of President Trump, red-faced and boiling, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, seated calmly, hands folded, holding his gaze. Within minutes of the town hall airing live, a user on X uploaded the exchange with the caption, "She ended him on national TV." Hashtag Crockett claps back. It didn't even take 10 minutes for it to catch fire. At first, it was political commentators. Then came the comedians, then athletes, then random users with no blue checks and only 30 followers sharing the clip with one-liners like, "She said what everyone's been thinking for years. I've never seen him this rattled." This wasn't a debate. This was a live dismantling. And it wasn't just the quotes. People clipped Jasmine's body language too, the way she stayed still while Trump flailed, the way she let silence hang in the air after each fact, letting it do the work, the way she didn't even need to talk over him to win the moment. By midnight, the hashtag #MadTrump was trending second in the US. By 2 a.m., it hit number 1. And by morning, every major outlet from the Washington Post to TMZ had the clip embedded at the top of their homepage. Even the normally neutral anchors couldn't hide their reactions. On a morning panel in Cleveland, a local reporter said on air, "I don't know what Trump thought he was walking into, but Jasmine Crockett showed up like she brought the entire courtroom with her." That line alone got clipped and reposted 3.2 million times in 24 hours. Meanwhile, Jasmine said nothing. She didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't go live. No victory lap. She had spoken on that stage, and to her, that was enough. The internet could do the rest. But the rest of the country? Oh, they weren't letting it go that easily. In barbershops and coffee counters across Ohio, people were already debating it. She held her own. She embarrassed him. She just put herself on the map. Even in conservative pockets, the reaction wasn't as clear-cut. At a diner in Findlay, a middle-aged man in a Buckeyes hoodie turned to his wife after watching the replay on his phone. "I don't like her politics," he said, "but that girl didn't back down. Got to respect that." And it wasn't just words. People started creating content, memes, GIFs, TikToks. One TikTok had Jasmine's most powerful quote cut to a marching band beat, and by noon, it had already been used in over 30,000 remix videos. Young people were quoting her in Snapchat stories. College debate teams were replaying her clip for strategy breakdowns. Even teachers in public schools were playing the clip in civics classes, asking students what they noticed about tone, timing, and facts. But the most unexpected reaction came from an old video that resurfaced that same afternoon, a clip from 2016, a courthouse interview back when Crockett was still a defense attorney. In it, she said, "People underestimate you when you stay calm. That's fine. Let them. Just means they'll never see the hit coming." The comments section exploded. "She's been that woman since day one. She warned y'all 8 years ago." And yet, despite the praise, Jasmine kept quiet. She didn't want the moment to become a spectacle. This wasn't a clapback for clout. This was pain, strategy, and truth. And she had delivered it exactly as she needed to. But not everyone was silent. Trump's campaign scrambled to release a statement by mid-morning. It was defensive, poorly worded, and ended with the sentence, "President Trump remains focused on real issues, not on dramatic performances by people craving attention." The irony didn't go unnoticed. Within an hour, that sentence was printed on shirts, followed by, "dramatic performance." That was clarity, JC. Everywhere she went now, people were calling her initials, JC, not just Jasmine Crockett, but just as called. But with the world watching and reactions pouring in from every side, the battle wasn't over, because the media was about to descend, and the spin machines were already revving up. The town hall was technically still in progress, but no one was really watching anymore, not in the room, not on TV, not even the moderator. The energy had shifted beyond anything the producers could reel back in. Panelists kept talking, sure, but their voices felt hollow, like background noise after the main act had ended. They were tossing out policy lines, statistics, phrases that no one would remember an hour later. All eyes kept drifting toward Jasmine. Even when she wasn't speaking, people were studying her, the way she sat, the way she glanced at each speaker with the same steady calm. She wasn't trying to dominate the room. She already had. President Trump, for his part, was stone silent, red-faced, and withdrawn. He stared at the desk in front of him, arms crossed so tightly it looked painful. No more outbursts, no more retorts, just a man who had said too much and realized it too late. Behind the cameras, staffers were scrambling. Network execs were on their phones, demanding last-minute changes to the next day's programming. They didn't care about the rest of the panel anymore. The show was now Jasmine Crockett versus Donald Trump, and they were ready to milk every second of it. At a CNN studio in Cincinnati, the production team cut into their regular segment to start live analysis. "She dismantled him," said political analyst Cher Langdon. And she did it without shouting, without theatrics. That was precision. That was lawyering. He couldn't touch her. "I haven't seen a moment like this since the Obama-Romney debate in 2012, added another guest. But this had more weight, more fire. Over on Fox, things looked different. This was clearly a coordinated ambush, said one anchor. President Trump was set up. They baited him with a radical far-left voice who came prepared with gotcha stats. But even there, even among critics, you could feel a hesitation. No one could deny what had just happened. They could argue it was unfair, but they couldn't pretend Trump came out on top. Meanwhile, on MSNBC, the host introduced a split screen of black women across the country reacting in real time, a community college professor in Akron, a nurse in Southfield, Michigan, a small business owner in Topeka, Kansas. "She said what I've been trying to explain to people for years," the nurse said. "It's not about being angry, it's about being told to sit down every time you speak." And tonight, she refused. The professor chimed in. That wasn't just a political moment. That was cultural. That was generational. The split screen blew up on social media. Suddenly, the hashtag she didn't sit down trended, joining hashtag Crockett claps back and hashtag Mad Trump. The original clip from the town hall crossed 25 million views by mid-afternoon. Back in Toledo, the official broadcast wrapped awkwardly. The closing remarks were rushed, the outro music played a few seconds too early, and the credits rolled over a still shot of the stage where Crockett remained seated, arms still folded, looking straight ahead. As audience members filed out, local news reporters grabbed quick interviews. "I didn't expect it to go down like that," said a man in his 40s wearing a camo jacket. "But I mean, she didn't lie. She came with receipts," added a college student holding a phone still streaming the clip. "That's what people want, not yelling, receipts." Some attendees just stood in the lobby, rewatching the moment on their phones, even though they had seen it live. And inside the green room, Crockett finally stood up. One of her aides offered her a bottle of water, and she took it with a nod, not a grin, not a "did you see that" moment, just quiet composure. "Are you good?" the aide asked. She nodded. "I said what I needed to." No victory lap, no gloating, just a long breath. Then she reached for her coat. Outside, cameras waited, hungry for a follow-up soundbite. She gave none, but she didn't need to, because by morning, her silence would speak louder than any headline, and the country was just beginning to reckon with what they'd witnessed. By the time sunrise reached the East Coast, Jasmine Crockett's face was already stitched into the internet's DNA. You couldn't scroll 2 posts without seeing her, whether it was a clip, a quote, or a photo of her seated calmly while Trump's hands flailed in the frame next to her. She had become the center of a digital storm, and not the kind you can plan for. Her name was trending in every state, including places where she had never campaigned, never visited, never been covered. And still, people knew who she was now. They didn't need a biography. The clip said enough. On TikTok, creators stitched the moment Trump snapped, "You're a disgrace," and immediately cut to Jasmine's line, "You don't get to define me, sir." Some clips added background music. Some didn't. But the impact hit the same. One user captioned it, "She spoke for every woman who's ever been talked over at a meeting." Another wrote, "This wasn't a debate. This was court, and Trump lost." In just hours, hundreds of remix versions emerged. Teenagers, veterans, nurses, even ex-police officers posted reaction videos. One former officer in Dayton, Ohio, posted a raw, unfiltered take, "I worked the streets for 28 years. She didn't disrespect police. She told the truth about the system. And if you can't admit that, you're not ready to fix anything." That video hit 5 million views in 12 hours. Elsewhere, a high school teacher in Santa Fe, New Mexico, filmed her civics class watching the exchange. After the clip, she paused the screen and asked, "What stood out to you?" One student replied without hesitation, "She didn't yell. She didn't insult. She just held the facts." The teacher smiled. Exactly. That's what power can look like. On Instagram, fashion pages were already dissecting Jasmine's outfit, a simple navy blazer with a muted pin, understated, sharp, deliberate. One style influencer wrote, "She knew she'd be underestimated, so she let the facts do the talking." That's real style. Meanwhile, parody accounts had a field day. A clip was edited to show Jasmine folding her arms and immediately cutting to a fake, "game over" screen, like she'd won a boss battle. That one alone pulled 3.7 million likes by noon. But it wasn't all love. Far-right accounts pushed hard to spin the moment. They called it an ambush, a setup, a publicity stunt. One commentator from a known conservative blog said, "She's just another loudmouth looking for a Netflix deal." But it didn't land. People weren't buying it. The footage was too raw, too live, too unscripted. And for once, even moderates were chiming in. A centrist podcast host with a large following posted, "I don't agree with her politics, but I respect the way she carried herself. No shouting, no dodging, just facts. That's how it's supposed to be done." And then came the celebrities, A-list actors, rappers, comedians, all sharing the clip, all adding their spin. One well-known comedian wrote, "She turned that panel into a masterclass, and Trump was still stuck in detention." A Grammy-winning singer reposted the clip with the caption, "This is what it looks like when grace walks into chaos." Within a single day, Jasmine's following tripled across platforms. She didn't say a word, no new post, no media circuit, just the silence of someone who didn't need to repeat herself. But supporters did the talking for her. In Charlotte, Michigan, a mural went up on the side of a community center, Jasmine's profile in blue, her quote underneath, "Truth doesn't need permission." In Springfield, Missouri, a group of local organizers gathered on courthouse steps and held a teach-in, using her clip as the centerpiece of their rally, no campaign signs, just laptops and speakers playing her exchange on loop. And by nightfall, one of the biggest surprises came from an unlikely voice. An email leaked from a senior member of Trump's re-election campaign read simply, "This moment hurt us. It's sticking. We need a pivot fast." It wasn't just a bad look anymore. It was a wound. And as the country kept replaying the moment, analyzing every word and every pause, one thing became clearer by the hour: Jasmine Crockett hadn't just taken control of a panel. She had taken over the conversation. But the media machine wasn't done yet. And as the pressure built, every outlet wanted her response, even if she wasn't ready to give one. By day 2, the questions weren't just about what Jasmine Crockett said. They were about why it hit so hard, why it spread so fast, why it made people pause. Every major media outlet had turned the confrontation into its lead story. But no one could agree on what it meant. The moment had gone beyond politics. It had become a national mirror, and no one liked what they saw. Cable news was relentless. Pundits sat behind polished desks, pointing at the clip like it was a crime scene. They rewound it, froze frames, analyzed Crockett's tone, her posture, her timing. They dissected Trump's body language like it was a forensic breakdown. You can see here, right before she speaks, he leans back, his fingers twitch. That's defensive behavior, said one behavioral analyst on NBC. On Fox News, they hit back hard. This was performance art, not politics, one host snapped. She humiliated the president, the co-host barked. The anchor shook her head. No, she humiliated the office. There's a difference. But even some right-leaning voices started to crack. A guest on a morning show in Lincoln, Nebraska, usually known for dismissing anything remotely left-wing, surprised viewers when he said, "Listen, I don't agree with her politics, not even a little. But she spoke from experience, and I can't sit here and pretend that's not valuable." Online, think pieces were flooding in. The moment black women took the mic and kept it, why Jasmine Crockett's calm was louder than any shout, what happens when the president can't control the room. But the most shared article came from a small publication out of Bakersfield, California. The title, "She Didn't Interrupt, She Outlasted." In it, the writer, a retired high school principal, broke it down simply: it's not just that she made her point. It's how she didn't move, didn't panic, didn't throw a punch. She let him throw his, and she was still standing when the dust cleared. That's strength. That's survival. People printed it out, taped it on classroom walls, read it at church, quoted it in sermons. Meanwhile, Crockett's office was overwhelmed. Calls, emails, requests. MSNBC wanted her for the 7 p.m. slot. CNN offered an exclusive. The Today Show asked if she could fly to New York. The View left 3 voicemails, and she said no to all of it, not, maybe later, not, I'll think about it, just no. Her chief of staff, a woman named Adrienne Bird who had worked with her since her State House days, fielded the storm with a quiet fierceness. She answered each reporter with the same calm tone: Congresswoman Crockett will speak when she's ready, not before. But the pressure didn't let up. By day 3, the White House issued a brief statement defending the president. He was passionate. It was a lively exchange. The president remains committed to criminal justice reform and appreciates a diversity of viewpoints. The language was dry, legal, almost scared, because the truth was, the moment had stuck. Trump's team couldn't erase it, couldn't distract from it, couldn't drown it in noise. Every attack they launched seemed to make her stronger. That same day, a conservative super PAC ran an ad in 5 swing states, calling Crockett disrespectful, loud, and dangerous. The internet flipped it in under 24 hours. People made their own versions: disrespectful, loud, dangerous. Sounds like every freedom fighter in history. Some even started printing those 3 words on hoodies. Meanwhile, Congress was returning to session. The Capitol felt different. Lawmakers whispered in corridors. Some avoided eye contact with her altogether. Others walked straight up to her, women especially, and thanked her. No cameras, no sound bites, just quiet moments of acknowledgement. One senator from Oregon, nearing retirement, caught her in the hallway. "I've been here 32 years, she said. I've never seen anyone hold their ground like that on live TV. It mattered." Crockett nodded gently and kept walking. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't savoring it, because she knew what came next. Every moment of truth cost something. But when Jasmine finally spoke, it wouldn't be in a TV studio or behind a podium. It would be somewhere much quieter and much more powerful. 3 days after the town hall, Jasmine Crockett stepped into a small community center in Tyler, Texas. No press, no podium, just folding chairs, a dusty floor, and about 40 people, mostly black women, a few elders, and a scattering of teenagers who'd come with their parents. The room was quiet, not because of nerves, but because of what she represented. In their eyes, she had done something unthinkable. She stood in front of the most powerful man in the country, told the truth, and never blinked. She wasn't there to relive the moment. She was there to listen. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice soft, southern, steady. "I know the last few days have been loud, but I wanted to be here, not because of the noise, but because of the quiet. This is where I learned how to speak." A woman in the back raised her hand shyly. "Can I ask something?" "Always," Jasmine said. "What gave you the nerve to say all that? I mean, in front of him, on TV?" Crockett smiled. "It wasn't nerve," she said. "It was tired." That answer sat heavy. She continued, "I'm tired of watching people bend the truth until it breaks. Tired of sitting in meetings where the pain gets filtered out to make people comfortable. I've spent years in courtrooms where my clients couldn't afford second chances, couldn't afford bail, couldn't afford mistakes. But the folks making the rules, they could afford everything, including silence." A pause. "Silence protects power," she said. "And I'm not here to protect that." The room nodded slowly, quietly. Then one of the teens, maybe 15, stood up from the second row. Her voice cracked slightly when she spoke. "Some of my friends said you embarrassed him. Like that was the point. Was it?" Jasmine leaned on the edge of a table. "No, I didn't go there to embarrass anyone. I went there to say what too many people are forced to whisper. If that's embarrassing to him, maybe that tells us something." She let the silence land, then added, "Truth is not aggression, it's clarity. And we've gone too long letting people confuse the two." A woman near the front, gray hair, church fan in her lap, whispered, Say that again." Jasmine chuckled gently. "You've all raised daughters. You know how hard it is to get people to hear them when they speak with certainty. We raise our voices, and suddenly it's too much. But if we stay quiet, it's not enough. I didn't speak to change Trump's mind. I spoke so that little girls like her," she nodded at the teen, "know they can challenge power and still walk out whole." That line hit differently. Someone wiped away a tear. Another whispered, "Lord." That day, Jasmine finally posted. It wasn't a quote, not a clip, not a picture of the town hall, just a note, handwritten on yellow paper. She posted the image with no caption. It read, "Speak the truth even if your hands shake. Even if your voice doesn't. JC." The image went viral instantly, not because of flash, but because of what it cost to write. By then, the media had moved on, a new scandal, a new poll, a new distraction. But Jasmine's moment didn't fade. It lingered in classrooms, lunch tables, sermons, dinner debates, office corners. It became a symbol, not of confrontation, but of clarity. Later that week, a podcast asked her if she'd do anything differently. She answered simply, "No, because I didn't go to fight. I went to represent." And she had. Not just her district, but the woman in the courthouse waiting room, the teacher trying to explain bias to a room full of shrugs, the nurse clocking in after watching her cousin get handcuffed for a broken taillight, the student who thought they had to choose between truth and safety. Jasmine didn't ask for the moment, but when it came, she didn't run from it either. Because courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it sits in a chair, folds its hands, and says what no one else is willing to say. If this story made you feel something, share it. Tell someone. Because moments like these don't just pass, they plant something. And it's up to us to grow it. Subscribe for more true stories that matter.